Battle of Kursk was a pivotal moment in World War II, where two of the most formidable military powers, Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, clashed in a titanic struggle. In this video, we'll delve into the background, key events, and the legacy of this historic battle. To understand the significance of the Battle of Kursk, it is essential to grasp the broader context of World War II in 1943. By this point in the war, Nazi Germany had already conquered much of Europe, but they faced fierce resistance from the Soviet Union on the Eastern Front. The Soviets had been steadily pushing the Germans back, and the Eastern Front had become a cauldron of brutality and destruction. The Eastern Front was characterized by vast distances, harsh weather conditions, and ferocious battles. It spanned from the Baltic Sea in the north to the Black Sea in the south, covering a vast territory that included Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. This front was where the fate of the war in Europe would ultimately be decided. The conflict on the Eastern Front had begun in earnest with Operation Barbarossa in June 1941, when Nazi Germany launched a massive invasion of the Soviet Union. Initially, the Germans made significant territorial gains, but they soon faced staunch Soviet resistance, particularly during the Battle of Moscow in the harsh winter of 1941. One of the key turning points on the Eastern Front was the Battle of Stalingrad, which raged from August 1942 to February 1943. The Soviet victory at Stalingrad was a devastating blow to the Germans, as it not only halted their advance, but also marked the beginning of the Soviet Union's resurgence. As the winter of 1942 to 43 turned into spring, the Germans began planning their next major offensive operation on the Eastern Front. They aimed to regain the strategic initiative, inflict heavy losses on the Soviets, and potentially knock the Soviet Union out of the war. This offensive would come to be known as Operation Citadel, and its primary target was the Kursk salient, a bulge in the front line near the town of Kursk. The Germans believed that a successful operation at Kursk could disrupt Soviet defenses, cut off key supply lines, and pave the way for a renewed push eastward. Unbeknownst to the Germans, the Soviets had gained valuable intelligence about the impending German offensive. Through a combination of intercepted radio communications, aerial reconnaissance, and reports from spies, the Soviets were well informed about German intentions. Soviet leader Joseph Stalin and his military commanders, including General Georgy Zhukov, recognized the significance of the Kursk salient and decided to fortify it heavily. They amassed substantial defensive forces, constructed extensive defensive fortifications, and planted a staggering number of anti-tank mines. The stage was set for an epic clash between two formidable military powers. The Battle of Kursk would become a titanic struggle that would test the resolve, strategy, and firepower of both the Axis and Soviet forces. In early July 1943, the German offensive, codenamed Operation Citadel, began. Field Marshal Erich von Manstein and Army Group South launched a massive artillery bombardment, followed by a full-scale tank assault. The Germans were determined to break through the Soviet lines at the Kursk salient and regain the initiative on the Eastern Front. The Battle of Kursk quickly devolved into a brutal and costly clash of armor. The Germans, known for their formidable tanks, deployed their powerful Tiger and Panther tanks, while the Soviets countered with the robust T-34 tanks, famous for their reliability and maneuverability. The tank battles at Kursk were some of the largest in history, with tanks from both sides engaging in ferocious duels, often at close range. The crews faced extreme pressure and danger as they maneuvered their tanks through the battlefield's treacherous terrain. The Soviets had meticulously prepared their defensive positions, creating layers of fortifications, minefields, and anti-tank obstacles. The German tanks struggled to penetrate these formidable defenses, and every inch of ground was bitterly contested. One of the most intense and iconic clashes of the Battle of Kursk was the Battle of Prokhorovka, which occurred on July 12, 1943. It was a massive armored engagement with thousands of tanks from both sides involved. The battle was brutal and chaotic, with tanks from both sides firing at point-blank range. The Soviets managed to hold their ground, and the German offensive was blunted. While Prokhorovka did not result in a decisive victory for either side, it marked a significant moment in the battle. As the German offensive ground to a halt, the Soviets launched a massive counteroffensive. They skillfully used their numerical superiority and strategically positioned reserves to encircle the German forces within the Kursk salient. This encirclement placed the trapped German units in a perilous situation, and the Soviets squeezed them from multiple sides. The Germans found themselves fighting desperately to break out of the tightening noose. By August 1943, the Battle of Kursk had turned decisively in favor of the Soviets. The German losses were catastrophic, with thousands of tanks and soldiers lost. The Soviets had not only repelled the German offensive, but had also launched a successful counteroffensive that pushed the Germans back. The Battle of Kursk marked a turning point on the Eastern Front, with the Soviets gaining the initiative and eventually pushing the Germans back into Eastern Europe. However, the battle exacted a heavy toll on both sides, with immense loss of life and equipment. As the Battle of Kursk raged on, the Germans found themselves increasingly on the defensive. Soviet forces, buoyed by their successful counteroffensive, continued to advance, pushing the German armies back and regaining territory. The German situation became increasingly dire as they struggled to withstand the Soviet onslaught. By late August 1943, the Germans had retreated from the Kursk salient, and the battle had effectively concluded. The Battle of Kursk was a bloody and grueling conflict that exacted a heavy toll on both sides. The Germans suffered immense losses in terms of men and equipment. Thousands of tanks and aircraft were destroyed, and tens of thousands of soldiers were killed, wounded, or captured. The Soviets also suffered significant casualties, but they had the advantage of greater reserves and the ability to replace their losses. The battle showcased the Soviet Union's ability to absorb and recover from tremendous losses, a trait that would serve them well in the later stages of the war. The Battle of Kursk had far-reaching implications for the course of World War II and its outcome. Turning point. Kursk marked a decisive turning point on the Eastern Front. The Soviet victory not only halted the German advance, but also demonstrated that the tide of the war had shifted in favor of the Allies. With their victory at Kursk, the Soviets gained the strategic initiative on the Eastern Front. They would go on to launch offensives that steadily pushed the Germans westward, ultimately leading to the capture of Berlin in 1945. German decline. The Battle of Kursk was a severe blow to Nazi Germany's military capabilities. The loss of tanks and experienced troops weakened the German war machine, making it increasingly difficult for them to mount effective offensives. Soviet strength. Kursk showcased the Soviet Union's strength and resilience. It demonstrated their ability to withstand and recover from devastating losses, which was a crucial factor in their eventual victory in the war. End of Blitzkrieg. Kursk marked the end of the era of German Blitzkrieg tactics, characterized by lightning-fast offensives. From this point forward, the Germans were largely on the defensive, and their momentum had been broken. The Battle of Kursk was a monumental clash that shaped the course of World War II on the Eastern Front. It showcased the tenacity of the Soviet people, the formidable strength of their defensive preparations, and the heavy price both sides paid in their quest for victory. As we reflect on this historic battle, we must remember the sacrifices made by the soldiers on both sides and the enduring legacy of Kursk as a symbol of resilience, determination, and the high cost of war. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the Battle of Kursk, a chapter in history that will forever be etched in the annals of warfare. We hope you found this exploration informative and enlightening. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to sharing more historical insights with you in the future.